Good morning. My name is Andrew. I'm the pastor here at Canyons Church, and I am so glad. I don't know where you're at in your faith journey, and I'm not sure what you've been wrestling with. I don't know if you're testing the waters out a little bit, or maybe you've already tested the waters out and you're ready to start taking some steps and actually see what following Jesus looks like actively. We're so excited for that whole entire spectrum. And if you've been a Christian your whole life, we're so glad that you're here as well. We have a great morning that I'm excited to talk about right now. And as much as, climate change, you might be wondering, like, are we talking about global warming? No, we're not talking about global warming right now. Um, we're going to talk about relationships. That's what this entire series is about. Relationships and the tensions that we have and the figuring out how to navigate through them. And it's not just the marriage relationship, it's all relationships. Every single person in here is a collection of all of your relationships. And even if you're married to someone and all of you know the exact same people, you have individual relationships with every single one of them. They're a different relationship than your spouse might have. So, in terms of relationships, there's one thing that we're going to talk about today that's a big piece of relationships. And I have a question to start off with. Is it just me, or does it seem like everyone has a similar default? I mean, all of the sane people, sane with an N, have a very similar default, and then there's the crazy people that have a different default. So I'll let you decide which camp you're in this morning. But when it comes to conflict, what do you do? What is your natural, normal default? This is normal people. We avoid it like the plague, or COVID, maybe more. I don't know. We'll leave that there. No, we avoid it. That's what the vast majority of people do. Like, there's a very small percentage of people that are like, say, no, I really enjoy conflict. I actually seek it out. I pursue it if at all possible. Those are the ones you got to watch out for. No, most of us, we don't talk about what bothers us in the relationship. It gets a little bit dicey, a little bit uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, I'm just gonna bypass that conversation as long as possible. Even though it hurts, even though it might be offensive to you, you have that thing and you just don't want to deal with it. So you just avoid it at all costs. And then eventually, that heat in the relationship turns to a boil, and all of a sudden you have a big mess because it boils over. I have an illustration for you. And I apologize if you've heard this before. I think it's been a few years though, so it's been a while. We'll share it again. This is when I was a child, so give me lots of grace and mercy here. I was growing up, and during the summer every single year, I would go to a day camp. I thought that's what the camp was called, day camp, but it was just it's what my parents called it. It's like, yeah, it's a camp during the day, and you come home at night. It was actually through my grandparents' church, so it was like 45 minutes away from our house. I stayed with my grandparents all week long. It was super fun. And my cousin and I, she was my same age, like within a couple months, we looked identical. People thought we were twins. We're not. But we went to this day camp together. And so the bus would come out and pick us up and then take it to the camp every single day. I didn't know anybody. I knew my cousin, that was it. But there was kids on the bus that would go with us. And one of them in particular was not nice, I guess would be the word that I would use. He was just kind of mean. Like, he would joke with you and just make you feel bad about yourself. And so I didn't like him. My cousin didn't like him. But we didn't want to talk to him to say, hey, stop saying that about us or whatever. So we came up with a plan. We decided that, and this camp was beautiful, gorgeous. There's like this little creek that runs through it, and there's a bunch of trees, and it's awesome. And we decided that when everybody else was playing, we would circle back around to like the field that you arrived in, where everybody put their backpacks. And so we did that, and we decided our plan was we would put slugs in his backpack. And we carried the plan out perfect. We did that. I was in like younger grade school and found like 3 big, huge slugs and threw them in there, zipped it back up, right? You don't leave it open. They gotta stay in there. So zip it back up, wash our hands literally, and then just go along with our day. And it was already after lunch, so he wasn't getting back in his backpack for a while. By the end of the day, though, he is trying to put his stuff, his like artwork that he, the macaroni artwork or whatever he did that day, trying to put it back in his backpack, and he opens it up, and there was gnashing of teeth and wailing. It was it was chaos, and my cousin and I immediately we were like, oh, we might have overdone it a little bit. We might have over, and of course they're like, who did this? And we're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Trying not to smile and smirk. I don't even know if my parents know that story. But here's the reality. When you don't deal with conflict, eventually it adds and adds and adds till it blows up and someone makes a bad decision, and then lo and behold, you have slugs in the backpack. So dealing with conflict is really important, and especially within relationships of all type, you're going to find conflict. So the climate in your relationships dictates the forecast in the relationship. This is kind of the overarching idea of what we've been talking about. So you have a climate in every single one of your relationships, and the dominant moods that you bring to the table in that relationship and your interactions, that's what defines the climate, essentially. And that climate is going to dictate what the weather forecast is in it, whether it is, stormy or whether it is sunshine all the time and wonderful. That climate dictates the level of weather in there. So, week one, we talked about, this big idea, but then I asked a question, and I said, what's it like on the other side of me? I asked you actually to ask that to three different people and listen to them. Because we make a lot of assumptions in our relationships that we know what it's like to be in relationship with us at different levels. We think that we know what it's like to work with us. We think we know what it's like to be our neighbor. We think we know what it's like to be married to us. And yet, it's impossible for us to actually know without conversing and talking with those people what it actually is like on the other side of us. Are there blind spots that we have that we don't know about? If you did that, if you actually had those conversations, good job. It probably stung a little bit. Like you have to have some thick skin to be able to ask that question and listen and not just get all defensive. But it's important because that information allows you to deal with those blind spots and actually move the radar, like make an adjustment in your climate in the relationship. Last week I talked about a major tension point within relationships, but it's a climate shaper, so to speak, and that's insecurity. That when we have insecurity within our relationships, it dictates what the relationship is like. If you have a boss or someone that you're working for that is insecure, it requires more margin of you because you want to like just bull through and just go in the direction you know you need to go, but you got to wait for him or her to make the decisions. Like, come on, dude. Or if you're married to someone with insecurity, or if you're friends with, it just requires more. Insecurity requires more on the other side of that person. Today, we're going to talk about another one of those climate shapers. Like I said, we're talking about conflict. Conflict in a relationship is a climate shaper. It defines what the relationship is going to be like, what it's like, the feelings, the emotions, everything that's wrapped up in the relationship is going to be affected by conflict. Now, anybody deal with any conflicts in the relationships? You can raise your hand. Okay, look around. Y'all a bunch of liars. Everybody has conflict in relationship. If you've been in a relationship more than 5 minutes, you're going to find that two imperfect people, because we're all imperfect, two imperfect people in a relationship of any type are going to have moments where you disagree. You see things different, and you're not going to want to back down. And it's going to be a tension point. It's going to be a conflict point to varying degrees, because some of it's like, well, I love peanut butter. The other person's like, peanut butter's gross. I'm like, well, come on. Have you tried chunky? It's way better. Right? We have these small, minute conflicts, and then you have major, big, huge ones. And figuring out how to walk through conflict is the whole point. We're all going to have conflict, so how do we navigate through? How do we walk through conflict is the whole point. And you can walk through it and just ignore it and have a negative, poor response in conflict that's not going to help it out at all. It's going to freeze over the relationship. It's going to be stuck in that spot. Or you can hopefully walk through in a healthy way, in a healthy manner, that's going to actually grow the relationship. So, the climate of your relationships, there we go. The climate of your relationships improves when conflict is resolved, not ignored. So that gut level knee jerk reaction that we do to try to avoid the conflict is not the right way to go about it. That we often feel like the absence of conflict determines the health of a relationship. It's like, well, if we don't have conflict, then it's a healthy relationship. And that's just not true. That equates to two people that are really good at playing hide and seek with their emotions. That's what that equates to. You're just really good about avoiding tension. It means that you're not facing it, you're not walking through it, you're just avoiding it. So when we think that conflict is negative and it's bad, it's actually good. I talk about this in our premarital counseling that I do regularly. It's like it's actually a good thing because often, unless someone's just being a jerk, then that's a whole other issue. But if you have a conflict where two people are talking about a specific topic, they see it differently, they both care a lot about it, and they have conflict in that, that's good. That means that you have common ground that you value. And therefore, if you walk through this in a healthy manner, it can actually become a strength for the relationship. You learn better, you learn about the other person even better than you did before. Now, if you work hard enough at this, you too can have a marriage like mine without conflict. False. Uh, yeah. Let's just say this. Have you ever gone to bed and you just finished the argument? We call them discussions at our house because we don't argue. But you finish the discussion and you're like, I won that. I totally won that. And then you turn the light off or it's already off because you're in bed when you're having this discussion. And then you're wide awake, like you're just elevated, you're wide awake, and you can hear the other person breathing. And after about the third breath, you're like, I start to feel bad about myself. Like you start feeling guilty about their breathing. Not that they're still breathing, but like, you get what I'm saying. That I know what she's feeling and I did it to her. Here's the problem about being a pastor. I'm pretty good at arguing, which means that I'm pretty good at not listening all the time, which means that I'm not always right. I want to be. This is true of everybody. It's true of everybody, right? So when we look at it, conflict makes you, and often we think that it makes us a problem, but conflict doesn't make you a problem. Conflict makes you a person, right? That's all that means. It makes you a person in a relationship. It is inevitable. So figuring out how to walk through conflict is what makes all the difference in our relationships. It's what defines a good, healthy, enjoyable relationship from one that we want to figure a way out of, from one that we want to minimize, turn down the volume, and eventually walk away from. Now, thankfully, if you look through the Bible, you look through the scriptures, you can find all types of people throughout history. The Bible is just littered with conflicts within relationships because it is humanity, right? That's what it is. So you can start with Adam and Eve, a little bit of conflict there. You can start with Cain and Abel. We talked about them recently. You can go to, Peter. You can go to Jonah. You can go to anybody. Like in Scripture, there's going to be conflict because they're people. I mean, all of them. And all of them dealt with conflict, and some of them a little bit differently. So we should also deal with conflict as well. We should expect that there's conflict and figure out how to deal with it. Now, thankfully, Jesus paves the way for conflict-free relationships. No. Again, that's a misconception. We think, well, if we have enough faith, then conflict-free, it goes away. No, that's not reality. Again, two imperfect people in relationship are going to have conflict. Jesus and following Jesus gives us the strength, the margin, and the ability to navigate and walk through conflict, not avoid conflict, but to walk through conflict and value the relationship the whole entire way. Now, the great news is also within Scripture, the authors of the Bible, they wrote these letters, and essentially what we look at is the Bible, and they weren't silent about conflict. So we can have some insights. I know I talked about Solomon not too long ago, but we're going to talk about Solomon again. Solomon, if you don't know, Solomon is the son of King David. King David was the second king. Solomon became the king, and he was the third king of Israel. And he's known to be the wisest man to ever live, which actually makes me feel pretty good about myself. Because when I look at Solomon's life, there's some things that he did that I'm like, I one up him. I'm like, I don't have a harem. Like, I don't have a collection of wives. That's not my life. That's not what I've chosen. I think that's a wise choice. I have not allowed any of my wives, namely one, to bring foreign gods into my home. Like, that's a thing that I haven't allowed. So I feel like there's some aspects of my life I'm like, okay, Solomon, I see you, but also I'm doing okay. I'm all right here. Solomon, though, he wrote this book called Proverbs, and this is just a book of wisdom. It's full of wisdom. And if you are just picking up a Bible and you don't know what to read, like you have those days, even if you've been a Christian your entire life, you have those days where you're like, I just don't know what to read today. Proverbs is a great place to start. It is a book full of wisdom and just kind of one-liners, quick hitters of wisdom. And lo and behold, there's 31 chapters in Proverbs, which means that at any point in any month, you can just look at the date that it is and be like, oh, today is the 29th. So let's look at Proverbs 29, and there's a great chapter to start with. So that's just a little inside information for you. But we're going to look at Proverbs chapter 3. Never let blank and blank, where you can get through those blanks, never let these two things leave you. Never let them leave you. It means like, even when it's hard, never let them leave you. Even when it's good, never let them. It doesn't matter the circumstance. Never is never. So never let these two things leave you. Tie them around your neck as a reminder. Write them deep within your heart. So whatever these two things are, you're carrying with you all the time. You're not leaving them anywhere. He continues on and says, then you will find favor with both God and people, and you will earn a good reputation. Now, what's fascinating about this, so this is a long time before Jesus is walking with his disciples, long time before Jesus' ministry, long time before Jesus is teaching, a long time before that, generations and generations before. And the wisest man to ever live, arguably, he talks about two primary relationships. Right? Jesus, we talked about this throughout the series, that the reason why relationships are so important is because when Jesus was asked, what's the most important command? What should I do with my life? What do I need to make sure that I am obeying? He said, well, it's the relationships. That's the most important. Obey God. Love God with your whole entire heart, your whole entire life. Everything that you are, love God with that. And then he also said, and the second thing is really similar to it, love people also. So love God and love people. Jesus' response for what's most important is relationships. Also, Solomon, wisest man to ever live, says, hey, these things that we're talking about is going to affect those two primary relationships, God and people. And you will earn a good reputation with both of them. So this is valuable, right? This is important for us to figure out. It's important to us to embrace essentially those two gaps that we're going to take with us everywhere. We have a decision when wisdom is presented, whether we're going to grab a hold of it or we're going to continue in our own way. And this is one of those moments, right? We show up to church and you might be asking questions, but also you might be deciding right now, am I going to implement what God has gifted me with this information, with this truth? If you want to follow after Jesus, we do the hard stuff. We do what he's asked us to do. Now, back to our initial verse. Never let the first blank is loyalty, and then there's a blank over here, leave you. Never let loyalty leave you. That's probably not what you initially assumed was one of the blanks. Never let loyalty leave you? Come on, what are we talking about here? That's not what, when we're talking about conflict, we're not thinking about loyalty. But it needs to be part of the conversation. Because in conflict, loyalty is actually what is challenged and what is lost sometimes. Right? That is a primary piece of conflict. That's what's at stake. And I get it. Conflict is messy, it's difficult, it's challenging. You have hurt feelings in the midst of it, but loyalty is not a feeling. Choosing loyalty in the midst of conflict is a choice. It's not easy. It's not what's natural. It's not what we feel. Because when you're in the middle of conflict, you just want out of it. You're just like, I want to be right all the time, or I just don't want to fight, so I'm going to leave. And anytime that you're leaving, anytime you're stepping away from, you're disengaging, you're moving in the direction of leaving loyalty at the table. See, loyalty causes me to fight for the relationship, in the relationship. It keeps you in the relationship while you're fighting for it, rather than stepping back from the relationship. Passivity communicates disengagement. When you're not willing to step into the battle, when you're not willing to step into the conversation, when you're not willing to step into that level of communication and authenticity, vulnerability, you're actually choosing to step away from loyalty. Even if it's a fight, it is healthy to move in the direction of the other person because that is loyal, because that is what is right. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Billy Graham. He previously was one of the most famous evangelists that has ever walked the face of the planet. He's had crowds of people that, incredible, incredible numbers show up to hear him talk about Jesus. Amazing. Now, he has this, he's well known around the world, and he's not he's elevated above. He's like a pastor of all pastors. I mean, everybody's like Billy Graham's at the top of the list. It's like God and then Billy Graham. So if you think about it in those terms, when they interviewed his wife and talked to his wife, they're like, these people are so in awe of Billy Graham and his wife, Ruth. And they asked her, this is a true statement, true question. She was asked if she'd ever considered divorce, and she replied, divorce? No. Murder? Yes. Which I love it. Obviously, she's joking, right? Let's be clear there. But I love that this is the flavor of relationship that she had with her husband, Billy. Because in that, it's like, no, I'm not going to disengage. It might end with me behind bars, but I'm not going to disengage. I'm going to remain connected. I'm going to fight for this relationship with everything that I have. I will not step back from it. I will not disengage from it. When we choose to avoid conflict, we are being disloyal. And you might immediately start to think how you can argue that, how you can, kind of bend the rules, kind of flex in it a little bit. Let's keep that in a gray area because it doesn't really feel good. But avoiding conflict creates separation. Avoiding conflict altogether means that you retreat from the other person, that you move away from them. And there's all different strategies how to navigate through, conflict. Sometimes you do need a break in the conversation in order to come back with a clear head. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is avoiding the point of tension altogether. Like not circling back around, we're just going to avoid that topic as long as possible. So if I feel that, if there's a point of tension in my marriage, or in different relationships that I have, if there is some type of conflict and I don't address it, I don't move in the direction of the person, I'm actually being disloyal to them. This should be a wake-up call for us. It should sting a little bit. It should shift some things in our life. Now, moving on to the other piece here. So never let loyalty and kindness leave you. And again, kindness, when you think of this in terms of conflict, we don't think of kindness. We're like, that's why it's conflict, because they're not being nice, they're not being kind, so that's why we're in conflict. How do you include kindness in the midst of conflict? It's the whole point, right? Protecting the relationship, even in the midst of conflict, is absolutely kind. In fact, it's one of the most kind things that you can do. There's a management theorist, and they actually have come up with this big word of fundamental attribution error. And essentially what this means is when you're in conflict, our knee-jerk and what we try to do immediately, the way that our brains work, the number one thing that we try to do is not only to figure out where they're wrong, where their ideology is off, where their mindset is incorrect, we also assume the motive for it. So not only are you wrong, but I know why you're wrong. Not only did you make the wrong choice, but I know your heart better than you do. And your heart is wrong, in fact. Now, if you do this in a relationship, you are actually defining the person and you're placing them in an inescapable box. They can't defend it. They can't get away from it. You're telling them who they are at a level that they might not even agree with or see themselves as. when you assign motive to their actions, that is an inescapable box for them. And it's not kind. Instead of assuming motive, seek to understand. That's kind. That's hard. That requires patience. That requires us to push down our emotion to be able to hear the other person. This prioritizes the person that we're in conflict with over the topic that we're discussing. That's where you value the person over being right. And it moves you in their direction rather towards winning the argument. Those are two different directions. Solomon, in all of his wisdom, strikes again. Right? This is such a big deal. The kindness piece. Never let it leave you. Don't forget it anywhere. Take it with you everywhere you go. Bind it around your neck. Place it deep within your heart that you always have it in your relationships. It is a key characteristic of the relationships that you have. And when you do that, it will start to shift the relationships that you have. The climate that defines your relationships will adjust. You'll start to see different weather patterns in those. There was a moment, another story here, kind of as we wrap up. There's a moment in my life where I was very, I was a senior in high school, and I was very involved in a lot of things. One of them was basketball, and I loved playing basketball. I played my entire life. And at this point, my senior year of high school, this is the moment, right? This is the season that everything's been leading me toward. And as a senior, I'm not trying to brag, but I was a good player. I was a starter. I was probably the best shooter on the team, and I for sure was the best defender on the team. I could guard anywhere from a 1 through 4 as far as the opposite team's positions. So I could guard just about anybody, and I could shoot really well. Smart ball handler, the whole thing, if I do say so myself. My senior year, I was a teacher's assistant for one of the other coaches, and I started to see this pattern happen partway through the season. A coach would call up and make an appointment with the head coach, a parent would call up and make an appointment with the head coach. They would meet, and then that son would have a different amount of playing time the next game. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then the next week, another parent would call up, and then all of a sudden I would see that person, that player, have some adjustments in their playing time. After 3 or 4 of these phone calls and meetings, I was beginning to sense a pretty clear pattern. I was like, okay, this is happening. Eventually, the coach pulled me aside right before one of the games. He said, Drew, I know you've been starting all season long. You've been doing great. I'm trying to adjust some of the rotations, and I'm going to see if I can bring you off the bench and have it be more effective. I'm a team player, so I say, okay, coach. I mean, that's your call, so okay. So we get into the game. The game is at North Marion. If you're at all familiar with Oregon, I don't think you are, but whatever. So I'm at North Marion, and we're playing against this team that we should beat. And I'm on the bench, and I'm not super happy about it, but I'm a team player, so I have a good attitude. And partway through the first quarter, he starts making some substitutions, and I'm not one of them. We finish the quarter, make some more substitutions at the quarter. I'm not going in the game. Partway through the second quarter, I'm like, okay, come on. I've been out for a while. And then he's not putting me in. All the way to halftime. Have not been in the game. My senior year, I was a starter. I'd started like 10 or 15 games already that season on the bench, the whole game. Partway through the third quarter, nothing. Partway through the fourth quarter, he puts me in for a couple minutes and pulls me right back out. I am so upset. I'm sure I looked like I was just beat red the whole time. Like I'm just glowing on the bench. And I'm angry. And I've got all kinds of words and emotions that I want to say. And I go to the locker room after the game, and he pulls me aside. My coach, Coach K. He says, Drew, I got to be honest with you. I completely forgot about you. He goes, I know it's not right. I know it's not fair. I just got into the game. I wasn't paying attention. Partway through the game, I noticed you hadn't been in yet, and I saw how upset you were. And then I was afraid if I put you in, that it might be a bad, like it might not work out super great. So I just made the choice not to. So I'm pretty upset. My parents were not super happy. My dad says, don't worry about it. I'll set up an appointment with the coach. And I thought, great, it's about time. So he sets up this appointment with Coach K. They go, it's in the evening. I'm waiting at home, like, come on, Dad, get him. And my dad comes home, is later that night. I was like, so, how'd it go? And I goes, oh, it was a great meeting, really good. And I was like, and the change is going to be, and he goes, well, to be honest, I didn't really talk a whole lot about basketball. And I was like, what? That's the whole point, Dad. He says, well, we got into the conversation, and I started talking about his marriage that was on the rocks and essentially ending. Started talking about life and how difficult that is. I started talking about our faith and what having faith in God actually means and how that works out into our life and the actual actions that we have and the relationships that we have. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, Dad, wrong move. He'll figure all that out. Like, why do you have to be the one? And why do I have to sacrifice my senior year for that conversation to happen? Now, the reality is, Coach K, came to his senses. I started the next game, and it was fine. It was just a blip on the radar. I didn't feel justified in the moment, though. In that moment, I was still upset. I didn't feel like the right thing had happened. I felt heard, but it didn't feel good. You see, the climate of your relationships improves when conflict is resolved, not ignored. It doesn't always feel good when you don't have the resolution that you want, though. Because sometimes you don't get it. Sometimes it's different than your goal. But there needs to be resolution to move forward in the conflict. And it is for sure hard to fight for conflict, especially with emotions and values and dreams and goals and all those things wrapped up in there. But what I learned in that moment that I've carried with me throughout the rest of my life is that it is easier, even if it's hard, it is easier for me to move forward if I know I've been heard. Coach K apologized to me. He talked to me. It didn't feel good for him to just say, yeah, that's my fault. I forgot about you. But that was the reality. And be able to move forward in that. My dad had a conversation with him that changed and shifted or had the potential to shift his entire life instead of just my playing time. That's more important, right? That's more valuable. Even though I was upset, frustrated, all the things, I didn't agree with all of it. But that was more valuable when I saw that from a different angle, right? So gaining perspective at 30,000 feet, that this coach was just a man that was broken. When I saw that from a different angle, it is critical at that perspective to be able to resolve the conflict at 3 feet. If you only see the person at that level this far away from you, you're not going to be able to see what's at play that's bigger. And this was really important for me to learn. This was really important for me to be able to embrace and process and learn that I need to carry through every single relationship kindness and loyalty, even when it doesn't feel good. Relationships are the greatest assets that we have. And if we just treat them like, nothing and we just, get rid of them all the time, swap through them and just run through people all the time, you're devaluing the greatest asset that you have in this life. We talked about insecurity last week. Insecurity forces us to win conflict at all costs or to avoid conflict at all costs. You know what the all costs is? The relationship. Your insecurity will run you out of the relationship. We say this all the time. You can write yourself right out of a relationship. If you're at the point where you have to be right in the middle of conflict, you can write yourself right out of the relationship. So the reason why we're talking about this at church, you're like, well, I thought this was about Jesus. It is. Because how well you love people is a way that we can express our love for God. And how well you deal with conflict is going to allow you to value the relationship It allows you to prioritize the relationship over being right. And I think that that truly is honorable. I think that that's what God has called us to. So I do have a couple discussion questions as we wrap up here. In your conflicts, do you tend to win at all costs or to avoid at all costs? Why, and is that helpful? Like, which direction do you typically go? What relationship or relationships are you in a conflict currently? Like, it's one thing to talk about this, it's a whole other thing to be like, I'm in the middle of that right now. Are you going to do something about it? You just spent an hour this morning listening to something. Are you going to put action to what you've heard? What can you do to move towards a resolution and towards the person? How would the constant presence of loyalty and kindness change your conflicts? What would that do for your relationships as a whole? Let me pray. We'll get out of here into the sunshine this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, first and foremost, God, we thank you for the relationship that we have with you that you offer us. That you desire to be in relationship with us. That the Creator desires relationship with the created. That is a gift. In addition, you also give us relationships. You present people in our life that we get to connect with, that we get to grow with, that we get to enjoy life even more so with the people that are around us. And God, I pray that in the most difficult relationships that we have right now, I pray that we would move towards conflict resolution, that we would find common ground, that we would decide it's more important to be in the relationship than to be right about a topic, a subject, a preference. God, you are so good, and you've set the example for us. Jesus had conflict with people, and yet Jesus died for people. So God, I pray that if we're going to choose to follow Jesus, that our lives would look like us sacrificing for others rather than demanding to be right. That would be the direction that we move. That would be the direction that we live in. And God, we thank you for everything that you've done for us. And I pray for healthy, helpful relationships in our life. We love you, Lord. Thank you for first loving us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for being here with us. We'll see you all next week for part 4.